Now, Gyi, the last time we spoke,
Conrad,
we talked about dark social. It sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it?
it does. You know what it makes me think of? Dark Helmet from Spaceballs.
Which is a terrible movie to watch with your kids. It should not be PG-13. I made that mistake. So I want to we've talked about dark social a lot, you and I. We talked about it on the last podcast episode, but I don't think lawyers, it's really being introduced to the legal community at all. And so I want to talk further about this. We've also talked about attribution. And most interestingly, in our review that we read from Tulybird, he talked about sharing the podcast with his partners, right? And that is dark social. Can you, Gyi, give a quick overview of what we mean when we talk about dark social?
Well, it's really anything that's not, you can't do great attribution for is really the best way to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's a word of mouth referral, could be like an email someone mentions, someone just, or it could be something that actually happens on a social media platform. That's the other, I think people get confused because, you say social and everyone thinks like social media, but social media is a part of the dark social equation because your attribution system essentially breaks
Right.
when someone reads something and makes a recommendation on social media, who gets credit. You have a great post on this on the Mockingbird blog.
Yeah, so we'll put that in the show notes, kind of going deep into what dark social is and legal marketing. But like a very simple example would be, Gyi writes a post about pay-per-click ads going up. I share that with my people. Some of my lawyers share it with a friend of theirs, and it goes on and on and on. And eventually, someone comes back to Gyi and wants to talk to him about pay-per-click marketing. Now, the attribution on that is really, really difficult. How do you track attribution in a closed channel like Slack, for example, right? How do you track attribution when there are so many ways for people to take content? We spend a lot of time talking about, content marketing, but a lot of that is sharing, right? And the attribution starts to become very, very difficult to track. In fact, it becomes impossible to track. Dark social is the concept is really pushed heavily by a guy named Chris Walker in the SaaS world. And so in the legal world, I think it's a little bit different, but not necessarily. It's all of the things that you can do in social and using social to reflect what you're doing in your community, to drive not just brand awareness, but in many cases, demand for what you do. And that's a fundamental difference of dark social. It's the generation of demand for what you do, as opposed to like the very linear concept of, I need to hire a car accident injury lawyer because I was just in a car accident and I got an injury, right? And I go to, Google and I fire up an ad and I click on the ad and I call the lawyers, and if they get back to me in less than 5 hours, I might hire them, right?
Yeah, no, and in fact, speaking of motor vehicle accident lawyers, you mentioned my friend Ken Levinson in your post.
Yes.
Who, they like hitting the Chicago area for lunch, and they film the lunch, do a review of the restaurant. They post that in, a variety of places online, including like Chicagoland food lover groups, and people give them feedback and say, hey, when's your next video coming out? And they send him an email, and then, they're staying top of mind. He also does an email where he sends out like books that he's reading and things he's learned from recent books. And so all that stuff, though, that you think about, which, historically people might call that, call it top of mind awareness. It plays into this concept of dark social because, the only way that you'd be able to actually do any attribution is if the person who ends up making the referral says, hey, I've been watching your lunch videos for years and I've got someone to refer to you, or I was just in a car accident, or a family member was in a car accident. So that's kind of that's another great example of dark social and the attribution issue.
So I'm going to use Ken Levinson as an example and just kind of lay out the key foundational principles for me in dark social for legal, because it's conceptually simple. It takes a lot of time, right? It's not something that just kind of rolls off easily. But the first thing that you mentioned is he talks about lunch. He's not talking about 7 things to do when you've been hit by a tractor trailer, right? They're talking about food in Chicago, right? This has nothing to do with the practice of law. The second thing you mentioned is they will take that content and post it in a variety of places. That means they're taking a single piece of content, chopping it up, reusing it, reformatting it, making sure that it can go on LinkedIn, making sure that it can go on Facebook, making sure that you can push it out in different places, right? Great way to take one piece of content and leverage that in many, many different ways. The next thing that you mentioned is that referral, right? You generate a referral network. So if you are interested in the food scene in Chicago, or if you are a restaurateur in Chicago, you probably know who Ken is, right? He is building up a referral network through dark social by talking about something that has nothing to do with the legal industry. And the beauty of this is you can leverage social media, paid social, to then say, all right, I'm going to push information about food in Chicago to people in Chicago who like food, right? And I can use social to identify those people. It's fairly easy. They're groups. You can advertise. It is the marketing of the content, not just content marketing. And so there's kind of this leverage perspective. And then finally, and this is the key thing here, Gyi, that you mentioned, is the attribution on this, impossible, right? So you get referred because you've been doing all these videos about food in Chicago, and Mary Jo gets referred to you, but it's because you've done all this stuff about food, and there's nothing direct or linear that the modeling that we typically do, right, in the pay-per-click or SEO or local world can actually pick up.
Right. And a couple other things just to pick up on some of the points that if you're out there and you want to try to implement some of these kind of strategies, tactics at your own practice, make it locally specific, right? So like, the fact that they're in Chicago and everything they do is like starts out Chicago, they invite people to come join them for lunch that aren't in Chicago from out of town. So, they're tapping into a more of a national audience, but they're reiterating that the psychological reminder of, hey, these are the Chicago guys. Who are those Chicago food guys who are also trial attorneys, right? So you're constantly thinking about that. And then, again, to the point about the attribution, and this is, the previous episode that we did where we talked about Rand's post, and this is the thing, you're marketing people and again, we advocate this. We want to hold marketing dollars accountable. We want to hold marketers accountable. And so we talk about things like attribution, last click attribution. And this is one of those things where it's like, don't cut off your nose to spite your face, because the value that you're building in that name recognition, in that awareness, in that network that you're building, frankly, especially as consumer journeys continue to evolve and if you're the people that you're trying to attract don't take that linear path, this is where there's tremendous value for you. But as Conrad mentioned, it takes time, doesn't happen overnight. But start planting those, especially if you're a new lawyer, you're just starting to build your name, start planting those seeds now, because they will bear fruit over time.
I mean, you mentioned it takes time. It takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of time to develop this content, push it out, etc. But like, this is, I hate to bring this back to the good old SEO adage, right? Like, it's going to take 6 to 12 months, but it's going to take 12 to plus months to actually make this happen. And so I don't think this is something that you can kind of dip your toe in and see how it went for, quarter 3, because it's not going to go anywhere.
That's right. And the other thing that I would tell you is that there's a certain amount of this is like, how interesting and memorable is whatever you're doing, right? So like, we can think we know a lot of like law firm personalities that you're like, whoa, like that's really like jumps out at you. There's a couple of lawyers on TikTok that, there's happen to be very talented with producing TikTok caliber videos that are very memorable and that people stick in people's head. And so, maybe that helps you shorten the timeline because you're more memorable. But the thing I always tell people too is it's not just about being remembered. You got to be remembered, and they got to connect it back that you're still worth referring the matter to, right? So like for direct to consumer, maybe all it takes is they got to remember, the vanity telephone number, people will tell you that all day, is all you need to do is get them to memorize your number. Doesn't even matter how good of a lawyer you are or yada, 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 just get them to call the number. But if you're trying to do like lawyer to lawyer referrals, or you're trying to do professional referrals, people want to know that they're referring to somebody that is good. And so connecting, not only is it, you got to be remembered, but you've also got to be known as like the person who does that kind of work and the expert in that kind of work. And so again, back to Conrad's point, that takes, a lot longer to establish that professional reputation than just get him to memorize your name and that you do that fancy dance on TikTok.
I thought you were going to be a little more pointed in that, but you were nice about it. So let me give you the other caution on this. This needs to be led by the leadership of the firm. This is not something that you can have, Joey, the marketing flunky, do for you, right? Because it is about you. It is about Ken Levinson, for example, right? But the other, hand in hand with that is like, and I don't mean this to be in a negative light at all. I can't make it sound positive though. You just might not be that right enigmatic figure that is going to kill it on social. And so, like, it's kind of harsh to say, but like, this is not going to work if you don't love technology, if you don't like getting out there, if you don't like being a front face of a firm. It is honestly not going to work.
Right.
And
you just made me think of two other things there.
Go.
The first one is whatever you're going to do, pick something that you actually or truly care about, right? Like,
yes.
Don't just like start brainstorming and be like, well, I could be the picnic lawyer. Do you love picnicking? Do you want to go out and picnic every day and get it? Because guess what? People can read it in your face, whether you really care about it or not. So find something you actually are passionate about that you actually truly care about. And then the other thing that you made me think of that I'm totally blanking out, of course, because I'm on the spot trying to remember it.
You're right. Here, think about that. I'm going to give you an example of doing something you're passionate about, and that'll buy you 60 seconds to remember what you're talking about.
Now I'm diving.
So for an example of that, Ben Glass, who many of you know from Great Legal Marketing, he is passionate about refereeing soccer. You think that's a tiny freaking niche, but like he talks about this all the time, and he talks about the abuse that soccer refs take all the time, and he posts regularly on this. This seems to me to be such a really, really small. Yeah, you're gonna try and get yourself in front of soccer referees. Like, what are you doing there? But I know this because I'm a parent. All three of my kids have played soccer. Like most parents at some point in time are going to go and watch their kids play terrible soccer, right? And most parents are going to watch referees get abused, right? So it's a great, it's something he's super passionate about, but that resonates interestingly with a really, really large audience. And so you can lean into what you are really interested in. I think the downside again is if you're not really deeply interested in things that other people are interested in, and you don't have an interest in sharing that interest, don't try this. Don't try this at home. Go back to pay-per-click and be unhappy with the results because you can't measure them.
Right. And that's, you just actually made me think of what I was trying to remember, which is if it's not your thing, if it's not your jam to be on video, you don't want to use social media, you know what, you're just like, I like practicing law, I do my thing, then somebody at your firm needs to, if you're going to do this, you need to delegate that to somebody else. And again, to Conrad's point, they're not going to ever be the expert, right? So maybe you hire another associate, maybe there's somebody at your firm that can, be the memorable part of your firm that can represent your brand. But again, my point is don't try to force a round peg in a square hole, because it just gets very cringeworthy, right? Trying to watch lawyers, do stuff on TikTok. It's out. You can go see it, because I know that they've hired these social media consultants to go do the TikTok dance, and you're just like, did that help you attract an audience that's going to refer, or are you popular because it's painful to watch you dance on TikTok?
Is your point here, if you feel like you have to hire someone to teach you how to do a TikTok dance, you shouldn't do a TikTok dance? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. Maybe there are great TikTok dance consultants that can really get you up to speed. But bottom line is you got to like to do it. If you don't like to do it, people are going to tell. You're going to be able to see it in your eyes, and it's painful to watch.
Money makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Money makes a world Yeah, money make a